All right. Dr. John Delony, thanks so much for coming on the
Thanks for
show.
having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time here as well. I mean, your work, I've just been following your Instagram account for maybe the last 3 months now and been hooked just based on the stories that you tell, the advice that you're sharing, live audience questions that you get where you can answer in real time and you don't really know what you're going to get out of it. So I love the spontaneity of it. But what's clear is that a lot of people are struggling out there. A lot of people are struggling with loneliness. A lot of people are struggling with financial difficulties, anxiety. All of these are rooted into this one pot that a lot of people already been talking about as well. When we were promised social media, we were promised being able to connect with people instantly from around the world with our friends. But what I see now from the younger generation is actually the opposite. I feel, even myself, feeling parts of myself where I feel more lonely, even though I feel connected. What is it about the kind of the paradox
Mm.
that we're seeing with social media and how connected we're supposed to feel, but us feeling lonelier than ever?
Yeah, I think it's um, man, not to get too graphic too soon, but I think it's the difference between um, having a true intimate connection with your wife or your husband or pornography, right? It looks like it's a proxy, but it's not. And like responding to somebody digitally, I get information, right? I'm getting information, but connection is physiological. Connection is rooted inside of our bodies, and it's been that way for hundreds of thousands of years, right? With tribes, you couldn't connect with your closest allies over, on the other side of the planet, and so it's cool. And man, when it comes to information transmission, when I think back to COVID, not in the dramatic like politics where it played out, but actual researchers talking to other researchers in real time and connecting things like across the planet. How amazing is
Wow.
that, right? This is just staggering and how cool it is. But when it comes to, um, you know, talking to my buddies and we just send memes back and forth and I say, hey, I heard your kid made the play. That's awesome. And I just send him a quick direct message and he writes me back like, thanks, man. That's not connection at all. And our bodies know the difference. And so our bodies are starving to death. And we just keep thinking that we're feeding ourselves and we're just not.
Yeah. I mean, how do we fix that in a generation where we're so tied to social media, our jobs, even you and I doing promotions and doing the being able to provide for our families is somewhat tied to social media. It serves us in a purpose. So how do we make sure it serves us in the benefits that social media provides, while also not letting it cripple us, the people around us, our kids?
It's I think of it as, and here's the benefit I have is I was the chief student affairs officer at a university here in Nashville before, and I had no social media, none. So I went as high as I could go in my profession at $1 billion college, right? So I had quote unquote made it. I got my job, and I had no social media. So I think number one, dispelling the myth that you can't get hired, you can't get the job you want, you can't X, Y, and Z without it is not true. It's simply not true. But like you said, you and I have entered into a media ecosystem that requires it, right? It is a tool. If you want to write a book, they will not talk to you if you don't have social media presence. If you want to sell the book, you can't without, right? So there's some things you have to do. I look at it for me coming to this game so late and starting a whole new career that's largely in this world. It's a billboard that you drive by on the highway. That billboard is a picture of me, and it was taken in a static moment, and it is telling you something that I want you to know. I've got a book out. I have a show. Here is an example of me talking to people in a tiny little snippet on my show. Here's an example of a little text post that I just put up there. It is a billboard. That is not me. In no way is that me. And if you see that billboard, nobody driving down the highway thinks, oh, that's John Delony up there, 75 feet tall above the highway. They all know that's just John Delony saying, I've got a show. Come see my live event. Come buy my book. And we have to just begin to decouple our identities from social media. It's not real. It is not real. And the more we live into it as though it's real, as though the connection is real, the communications are real, the people asking for love and intimacy are real, the curated lives we see of people are real, the more we believe that, the sicker we're going to become. The more we understand we are just transmitting information, we are just transmitting snapshots, and it's a great place, like a billboard used to be. It's a great place. If I want to read a book on anxiety, I can look up some guys who are selling books on anxiety and get to know them a little bit and get to know about them a little bit, and then know, okay, I'm going to pick that book up. And so it's a billboard. It's a talking live billboard, and anything other than that is ultimately not true.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? Decoupling the identity of someone not responding to us, let's say on an Instagram DM, that affecting our whole day because we think there's someone that's taking it personal out of, we're taking it more personally when they're probably busy.
But that's like being on top of the billboard and then being mad that somebody didn't turn their head to look at us, right? They're already down the road.
Right.
Who knows? They may be trying not to go to the bathroom in the car. They may have a kid in the car. They may just be being a good driver and keeping their eyes on the road, right? So there's, I keep forgetting who he is. It's one of the godfathers of psychology, Adler, I think. I think it was Adler who said, I thought that I could heal, that if I took away my patients' anxiety and depression, that I would heal them. And in fact, when I took away their anxiety and depression, I made them hollow. And so what he was teaching young therapists is you can't just pull people's crutches away. You can't just take something away. You have to fill it up. And so I think the cornerstone of answering your question is less about my interaction with social media and more, what are the things that I have to do in the real world in my real life? Because when I'm hanging out with friends and we're going to concerts and we're moshing, I'm way too old to be in mosh pits and I still get in there. Like when I'm at concerts and we're having a great time and then I hang out with my kids. I had an amazing Father's Day yesterday. The thought of picking up it occurs to me less and less and less and less because I have backfilled that space I was outsourcing to social media with real human connection. And it's like eating a great steak. Your body's going to always settle in a little bit deeper than when you just fill it up with Twinkies and ice cream, because one of those is real food and the other is just junk, right? And so I am going to intentionally go be awkward and go be weird, and I'm going to hang out with real people. And if I don't have that, I am going to make that number one priority in my life over getting a new job, over getting a raise, over moving to a cooler apartment. I'm going to find a group of people to hang with. I'm going to make that a mission over the next year, 2 years of my life. And I'm going to learn things about myself. I'm going to learn things about my neighborhood and my community. I'm going to go be weird. I'm going to invite people over. I'm going to start a bowling league, just things that you think your grandparents would do. And then I'm going to begin to deal with the relationship with social media, because I can almost guarantee you, as you get deeper and deeper real human contact and you go out into shows and you go back to church and you do some of these, you join a bowling league or a club or an organization of whatever, a service, whatever, your body doesn't crave this cheap substitute of connection because you're giving it real food, right?
That should be a great framework just in general, right? Instead of what would your favorite celebrity do, you should just ask, what would your grandparents do back in their day?
There you go.
Which is probably like no social media. You're hanging out in real life, doing a barbecue, bowling, as you said, like real stuff, like real in-person interactions. I think that's a good motto to live by for people that are figuring out how to get started.
And by the way, that's awkward
in person.
And it's in rejection in person is the worst. If you think getting rejected on social media is bad, having somebody tell you like, I don't want to go to that thing anymore, or I don't love you anymore, or you find out they invited a bunch of people to go bowling and they didn't invite you this time, dude, that is crushing. It hurts. But avoiding that, trying to build a hack around that is just, it's a destiny of loneliness and a cascade of terrible physical and psychological effects. You got to go through it.
There's a great quote that I love from your book. It says, It's a bit of a long one, but I'll go through it. When a prisoner violates the rules of their jail, they are sent to isolation, the whole, after a judge and jury have removed a person's freedom and locked him or her away. There's still one more punishment that can be dished out. They pull him or her from the presence of other prisoners and make them spend time alone, completely alone. Some psychological researchers consider isolation a form of torture. And now this is all of us. We're doing this to ourselves. To build a non-anxious life, you have to choose to invite other people into your life. Knee to knee and shoulder to shoulder, you have to choose openness. You have to choose awkwardness. You have to choose not a life of isolation. You must choose connection. I think that's a great summary of all of the things that
that's it,
you're talking about.
That's it. Yeah. And we just have to be honest with ourselves as a society. If I choose loneliness, I'm choosing an early death. And the hard part about that one is you take down everybody with you, because everybody's left wondering what was wrong with them that you wouldn't call, that you wouldn't return the calls, that you wouldn't go to dinner, that you wouldn't go to the party. And it has a ripple effect that is just devastating.
How do we get over these previous attempts of connecting with people where maybe they've hurt us? Maybe we've been through rejection through a friend, as you mentioned, you invite someone to an outing, and that you realize a week later, because everybody's posting everything they're doing on social media, on Instagram stories, you find out they did something else with your other friends. These little rejections happen all the time because of how much we publicize every single thing that we do on social media. And we take these small, little, really irrelevant actions, like someone not responding on time, as a sort of rejection. So what happened before was you would have to get rejected in person. Somebody actually had to tell you through your face that we're not going to hang out, or this is not working out. Whereas now there's so many other ways to find out what other people are doing outside of your physical presence, that we're getting rejected all the time. These mini rejections add up. And what happens is that we get afraid of reaching out and putting ourselves out there to be vulnerable, to go out, to ask someone out, to have community events, or asking someone to do something. How do we get over that? How do you encourage someone that has gone through these negative rejections before, that have trouble now getting themselves over the hump of being vulnerable again?
Well, I think if the positive stuff on social media is not real, then the rejections aren't real either. And these not microaggressions, the micro rejections you're talking about, they just happen all the time, right? You see somebody, like your buddy, post a thing and he's fishing, and you first thought is like, well, why didn't you call me, dude? I love fishing, right? I went to do an interview recently, and the person canceled, and then starts posting later this amazing event they were at. I'm a grown man with kids and a wife. Like, I don't care.
Wow,
and dude, it bummed me out. But here's the thing. It bummed me out for about 30 seconds or a little bit longer, because I had traveled a long way. But at the end of the day, that person revealed themselves, right? That's their issue. And I'm known and loved to the people that I have given permission to have a vote in my life. And so I get to choose from that point forward. Am I going to create a story about how I'm a victim in this thing and yada, or am I going to move on with my life? And so the in-person rejections are the ones that I think stay with us, and they hurt. And in fact, emotional rejection sits at the same place in your brain where physical pain sits. And so it's real. Getting rejected, getting dumped, getting left, having your friends finding out like they went fishing or bowling, or I keep coming back to these old man things, but dancing or going to a concert without you, it hurts. It absolutely hurts. And to deny that is silly, right? To try to flex through that and be like, yeah, I don't care. Well, then you're not a person, because that hurts. I think it's a matter of, like, back in the 50s and 60s when they told you smoking was good for you. And when you felt nervous, when you feel nervous or you feel a little bit down, nicotine picks you up, right? And I think it's a matter of when they told you, okay, we were wrong, smoking is going to kill all of you brutally with a terrible lung cancer disease. Then the idea was, well, then how am I going to handle this boredom? How am I going to handle this stress? How am I going to handle this when I'm feeling low? it's not an excuse to keep smoking. You have to stop doing that because that's going to kill you. That means I got to go figure out another way to get through these hard times. And so when you get rejected, the worst part of getting rejected is the pain, but also it makes you hesitant to go connect again. And your body has to have that, right? And so it's knowing, okay, I got hurt that time and I learned a couple of lessons. I gossiped about that person. They don't want to be around me. Or I kept interrupting people to tell them how cool I was. Or I couldn't shut up about my high school football days or whatever this thing is, the reason they don't want to be around you. Or I realized my breath was terrible and now I brush my teeth. Whatever it is, you learn, or maybe you realize, oh, they were just jerks and I don't want to be around them, right? But whatever it is, you can't go around it. You got to go through it. I got to go ask another friend, hey, you want to come over? I got to ask another friend, hey, you want to go see this movie? And if you keep showing up, eventually you'll find your weird group of people that do the weird things you do. And I'll never forget the first time I went deer hunting and I got a deer and I had to put it in the back of a Prius because I like good gas mileage and I like to lessen my impact on the world. And so I like hunting too, and there's not a lot of hunters who aren't driving huge trucks, and there's not a lot of Prius drivers who are so it was a weird. I found my people, I found my gang, and it's a group of hunters that make fun of me and love me. It's both and, right? And so we go do our lives together. And so, but it took some time. I'm a weird guy, but it's been worth it. And now I've got a group of men who love me and who I love, and they'll show up for me, and I'll show up for them. It just took a lot of awkward, bumbling around to find that group. And it's hard and it's painful, but you still got to keep doing it. It's not an excuse to not do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember when I was young, these small mini rejections, even if it's online, like the great example of what you mentioned of someone saying they can't do something, and then you find out on Instagram that they're doing something, those things, before it would eat me up, right? And you would think about it, and you would think about all of the things that probably were just made up in your head. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same thing, right? They'll say, John, it's easy for you to say because you have a best-selling book, you're successful, you've had time to work on yourself, you're a lot older, you're more mature. And they're saying, when these things happen, I still can't just say, oh, this person is not a great person for me. Sometimes they actually want them more, right? This kind of unhealthy attraction of like, oh, this person is walking away or is not willing to hang out with me. Now I want to hang out with them even more. You want what you can't get. And I'm sure there are people asking you, like, what are the things that they can do that you've done maybe to get over that?
Well, the way you just described that, I want everyone listening to hear that, because I think that's how we are approaching human connection in the modern era, or relationships. And it's really dangerous because it's using people as your Xanax or as your cocaine. It's other people's job to make me feel okay about myself. It's other people's job. And so I'm going to reach out to you. I want to be your friend for what you'll do for me, not for what we will create together. A relationship that we will create moving forward, so we can go hunting together, so we can start a business together, so we can get married and start a life and start a family and create a world together. It is, I'm getting married because I need you to complete me, right? I'm getting married because you are going to be the solution to all my insecurities and all my fears about the world. I want to hang out with you because you are cool and you drive a cool car and you have money, and I want to borrow some of your social capital to make me feel better about myself. That's just using people, man. That's not friendship. That is going to be hollow and run aground every time. And I'll also tell you, to people saying what you said, I think you're right. People are like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. One of the loneliest moments in my entire life was after a book signing, the night I found out my first book went to #1. And it was a #1 book in America. I did a book signing and the line was out the door and it was amazing. And I went back and I'd already called my mom and I'd already called my wife, and I went back to my hotel room and I had nobody to call. It's one of the scariest, loneliest moments I can remember, because I remember like going, oh my, I've got nobody. And dude, I've got the greatest friends in the world, but 1 week had turned into a month, had turned into 5 months, had turned into 9 months. I hadn't called them. I've been writing, editing, promoting the book, getting out. I stopped returning texts, and I was like, "Hey, what's up, guys? I got to bounce." And I didn't show up to when we got together. And suddenly I look up, and it's been almost a year, and I'd created a little cushion around myself that included nobody. And so, in fact, the more successful you get, I'm telling you right now, I've lived it. I'm living it in real time. The lonelier you get, because either people only want to interact with you because they want something from you, or they only interact with you because they want to be around you. And they are not truly just showing up to be like, "Hey, what's up?" Past the Chick-fil-A sauce. They want something, and it becomes a predatory relationship, right? It becomes they're using you for cocaine or Xanax. And so I want people to start going into relationship. And by the way, I think all of this centers around, I think we don't like ourselves. And I think that we somehow have come to understand, because we've turned every relationship on planet Earth into a transaction, we come to understand that we're a burden. If we ask somebody for help, if we ask somebody for support, if we ask somebody, "Do you love me?" we think we're a burden. And so I wrote about this in the book. We don't ask, "Hey, can I borrow eggs?" We just Instacart it. We don't ask for a ride. We just Uber. We don't do these basic human connection things. We outsource it. We pay somebody for it. And that's dangerous ground, man. It's turned every relationship into a transaction. And then when you move that over to our friendships, we don't even know how to do that anymore. I asked my neighbor, he is in real poor health. He's an older man, and he's just awesome. And I asked him, "Hey, will you come have coffee with me one day? Just show up on my porch. I'd love to just have coffee." I live out in the country outside of Nashville. And he has a little 4x4, a little like a four-wheeler, a real, like with a cover on it. And I said, "Man, I'd love it if you drove up the hill where I live and had coffee with me." And he's like, "I might do that one day." And he said, "What time on Saturday?" I said, "Come at 7. I didn't think he was going to come. 7:00 this past Saturday. My doorbell rings. My wife's like, "Who's that?" And there he was. And man, we sat on the porch for 2 hours and told stories. I don't want anything from that guy. He didn't want anything from me. We just laughed, told stories. He told me how awesome it was to see my kids out working in the yard. It was just a cool, human interaction, and there was no exchange. There was no transaction. And that is what I think our bodies are desperate for. Am I okay? That's my neighbor. I know that he's caring for my family, and he knows that I'm caring for him and his. And then my body can go and relax, and I don't have to go to this imaginary world on this digital box for like this pseudo approval, because I've got a neighbor who knows my name and who is looking out for me. And it's a totally, it's the way we're designed to live, and it's also totally countercultural these days.
It is. Yeah. I mean, with just few authentic relationships that I think most people can have.
That's a great way to say
it. I think most people can really have maybe within their hand the number of actual friendships that they can really count on. And I guess, how would you recommend people to have more of these authentic relationships, to build these communities? You know, the Japanese have this term called the moai. It's popular in Okinawa, which is one of the blue zones. And it's really central to how they have been able to live as long as they have. There's I think there are over 100,000 centenarians there in that place in Japan alone. It's amazing. And they attribute that to building the community. So how can we build that community within our little city or even our online circle that's safe, loving, that's giving value, that's not transactional?
Man, that's such a great question. So I'm just going to use my neighbor, and I won't use his name on the show, but I'll call him Dan, Mr. Dan. He's 25 years older than me. And when I first moved in, I basically moved into his into his backfield, right? There's acres behind his place. And so I have to drive through his driveway to get to mine. So the first time we met, we shook hands, and it was kind of awkward. Like, who's this guy moving into my back place? And I'm like, who's this old man? I don't even know this guy. And why is he parking this car out? Right. That's how it kind of started. And it was several months of pleasantries. Good to see you. Good morning. And then a couple of times when I'm going down to go for a run, instead of taking the run, he would start talking, and I just would skip the run and we'd sit down there and talk. How's it going? How's the weather? Have you seen so-and-so? And so I think the first thing is these things take time. And in a world where we have 2-day free shipping on everything, from you can order something from Okinawa and have it sent to Nashville, Tennessee in 2 days free shipping, right? It's like we have to give these things some time. And I had to let some things go. I'm a guy I got every bit of my day mapped out. I'm going from here to here to here. And then I had a neighbor and I just stopped and said hello. And then my chickens, one time we were out of town and my chickens kept cranking out eggs. And we ended up with so many eggs. And so I told my kids, y'all fill up a couple of these cartons and take them down to the neighbor. Well, I didn't know that he's on a fixed income. I didn't know that those eggs were life. And then I walked down the next time and he had a couple of other empty cartons. And he said, man, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I was like, well, man, I've got a whole bunch of deer meat too. So that started here's a gift. And then his brother came over one day and completely graded my yard that had gotten washed out after a big bad rain. And so I tell you all that to tell you it took time and it took kindness and it took attention to detail and listening. And it took all of us being a little uncomfortable, a little of us going first. And now I got a buddy that can sit on my front porch. And the other day I was doing his yard. I was helping him weed eat a part of his yard down in a culvert where he couldn't get down because he's just older. And then I invited him over to the house and he showed up. And that was awkward for him. That was weird for him. And he came and we hung out for a couple hours. And I don't think he liked the coffee and he drank it like a champ, right? He drank it like a champ. And then we hung out on the front porch. And so I think the keys here is, number one, it's going to take time. Don't rush it. Number two, everybody's got to be awkward. If you think you can develop this skill and these lifelong friends without it being awkward, you're wrong. Also, don't try to be right. Don't try to be transactional. Don't try to get something. Just connect. Bring a game. Bring some coffee. Ask some stories. Asking a guy who's in his 60s or 70s to tell some stories is one of the funnest things I can imagine. He talked about going to jail like back in the old days. I mean, it was just amazing, these stories. And so get to know people just to get to know people. Everything's about networking and connection. And, hey, what can you do for me? Dude, like what just about, hey, my name is John. Hey, my name is Sean. It's good to meet you. Tell me about your life. And let's start there. And eventually we may have some connections. One day I may be like, hey, Sean can help me with this thing. But if you approach everything as a tit for tat or hey, what can you do for me? It's always going to be a business relationship and your body's never going to let you rest. And so be awkward, go first. It's going to take a long time. They're not all going to work out. People say no, and it's because they're going through stuff, not you. Don't take things personal. So that's 4 or 5 of the big rock things. And make no mistake, this is way harder on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis than picking up social media and just scrolling. Those psychologists and the app developers, the neuroscientists, they know what they're doing when they're creating apps that we can't put down. They know that Twinkies are easier to just eat than cooking a steak dinner and growing vegetables and eating those. They know. And so we have to just know that over the long term, it's going to kill us.
Yeah, it seems long term is kind of the key to a lot of the things that you're talking about there. Naval Ravikant has this quote, but also framework around success. And the biggest one that he talks about is find things that compound in life, whether that is simply just finances like your investments, but also your learning and especially your relationships. The relationships that you've developed over time compound as you build more trust, loyalty, goodwill, good value. And it seems like most of us were just playing the short-term game, which is where perhaps the transaction comes in. Is, I lived in New York for about 1.5 years, and it felt to me, because the chances of you running into someone in New York City again is so low because of how big the metropolitan area is, that people just don't care. There's no sense of, in game theory, there's this tit for tat strategy of like, it's just, you're going to meet someone, probably never going to see them again. So there's no incentive to treat them well, right? They're not playing the long game of relationships. And it seems like in a world of social media where you're a swipe away from finding the next match on Tinder, or you're a DM away from finding someone else or blocking them, just how easily you're able to access and de-access people. It's just, we're triggering and building certain psychologies to be short-term thinking, which is where this whole root comes in.
Well, and think about how the
and,
political discourse has shifted. It's so dehumanizing. The reason we're allowed to talk about each other the way we do in public, which is just go back 15 years, go back 10 years. It's astounding at how vile the discourse has gotten. Not that we didn't think these things or say these things in private, but there was a respectability, a nobility. You don't say that about somebody in public. That's all gone now. And I think it was a quick hop and a skip and a step and a jump away from people are so disposable. I can let you in and cut you out of my life with a swipe and a block and an accept and a like and a not like. It's so fast now. And I can cut and paste something and edit it or clip you and have your life ruined so fast. Everybody's just so disposable now. And then I go back, I got to see my neighbor every day. And I know his name. He knows my name. And I know where he lives. He knows where I live. And we also share a water system. We share a well, and we share a spring. We're in this together. And so we're not disposable. We're going to do life together. And so we have a choice. We're going to do life together miserably, or we're going to do life together amicably and hopefully joyfully. I get to choose which life. And so that means I'm going to shut up about certain politics or a certain this or this because they don't matter. What matters is I like this guy. And I hope that he likes me. But yeah, I think this ability, you nailed it. This ability to just swipe and move and swipe really turns people into these disposable little Xanax moments for us, or little hits of crystal meth, and then we can get to the next and get to the next and get to the next. And it allows us to stop looking at people as people. My neighbor's a real guy, and I care for him, and I care about him, and hopefully same with me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's even I think Dunbar's number, who's like Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist, he talks about 150, right? How
max.
Before in tribes, max. And you think about the number of Instagram followers we have or Facebook friends that we have, and it's just overwhelming of how many people we're connected to. We're not built for that naturally, just based on how we grew up. And it makes me kind of think about anxiety in that way as well. And whether you'd love to get your thoughts on this, on whether you think anxiety is something that a lot of that we inherit just from ancestors or parents, or is it mostly developed something that we have learned just through modern technology and how we're over connected in this world?
So this analogy may not run. The way I teach about anxiety is it's just a smoke detector in your kitchen. That's all it is. And I think different brands of smoke detector are like different genetic predispositions. Some are going to be more tightly coupled. They're going to have a quicker trigger, right? A teeny tiny wisp of smoke is going to set them off. Others, the house may need to have a little more smoke in it before it sets the alarm off. And so when it comes to genetics, I don't think anxiety itself is genetic. I think anxiety is the different brand of smoke detector that I get versus the one you got. And then that same fire may or may not set it off. And some people are genetically predisposed when they get excessive amounts of stress, their body tends to shift down, right? So they may have a genetic predisposition to depression. That just means their body's going to respond to stress in that way. Mine is I get real anxious and I get real OCD and I spin up real bad. Those are my two diagnostics. And I'll, along with ADHD, and I'll spin and I'll spin and I'll spin, and you throw chaos in there. Or the way I usually teach about genetics is this: think of it this way: you have a basement at your house, and I've got a basement, and my friend Sam, she's got a basement. In your basement, there's just like you have a candle shop, and you're making beautiful scented candles. And in Sam's, she has a yoga studio, and in mine, I'm repairing motorcycles. If a fire comes through, yours will burn down gently and quietly, and it will smell really good when it burns, right? It'll just simmer down. Mm-hmm. Hers, the bamboo floors may light up real quick, and it may be a flash, but the yoga studio will just burn and it'll be done. Mine's going to explode, right? That's genetics. The same fire is the same fire. And it just depends on which set of genetics and which set of environmental stressors and which set of, what nutrition you're putting in all these other things play into what happens afterwards. But anxiety is just an alarm, man. And so can it be learned? I think anxiety can become an addiction over time. And I think the jury's out in the literature as to, is your body addicted to the stress chemicals that kick off, to the corticoids that kick off when you're anxious, or is it kick off the anxiety response so it can get your numbing mechanism, whether that's alcohol or pornography or an affair or some other thing. But we do get addicted to anxious states of being for whatever reason. I don't really care what the chicken or egg conversation is. I just need to know that my body is trying to get something from this anxious state. It's trying to feel safe again, and it's going to continue to default there until I deal with the fire. That's the main crux of my argument is anxiety is not the issue. Anxiety is just the alarm system. What we need to deal with is the fires. And so I think it's both and anybody who tries to sell you anything, it's just this or it's just this, that's snake oil, man. Anxiety is just your body detecting that you're not safe or that you're not going to be safe into the future and trying to solve it in the present. And so let's solve some of those bigger rock issues upstream, and anxiety usually works itself out.
Yeah, explain that a little bit. You mentioned the relationship between the addictions that we have with the anxiety that we feel. Is it that we're actually tracing the potential addictions like drinking or sex or sugar or whatever it might be that our addiction might be? Is that kind of the underlying thing that we're actually going for that's triggering the anxiety? Can you kind of explain that relationship?
There's just a discussion among nerds, my nerd community, as to is there an addictive property to stress hormones? And does your body get addicted to adrenaline? Does it get addicted to cortisol? Or whenever my body floods with adrenaline, I'm going to go work out real hard. And then my body gets addicted to the chemical process after that. Or if I get adrenaline, I get anxious. Maybe I'll take 5 Xanax. Maybe I'll have 2 shots of whiskey. Maybe I'll numb out in front of a video game. And so I think there's a chicken or egg component as to why your body keeps spinning things up to try to protect you. And it's chasing those chemicals on one side of the equation or the other. I don't think it matters. I think academically it can be fun to go search that out and try to tease that apart. I think for the average man or woman just trying to live their life, I don't think it matters. I think what matters is if you continually live a life where you owe a whole bunch of money, you have no relationships, your job is constantly on the edge, you're in an abusive workplace or an abusive romantic situation, you're 35 and you still live with your parents and your dad's telling you how you're going to live your life, your body would be failing you if it wasn't setting off the alarms, because it knows innately you're not okay, you're not safe, you are not safe. And so instead of trying to stop the anxiety, let's go it's like walking up and taking the batteries out of the smoke detector. Instead of doing that, let's deal with the fires in the living room and the kitchen and the back bedroom. Let's set those out and the fire alarm will stop. Now, if you're like me and you avoid it year after year after year, my alarms got so screwed up after they didn't work anymore. They were just ringing all the time. And so there was a season when taking the batteries out, which is getting on medication. There's a season when that's important because you got to recalibrate the whole thing. I could not hear a therapist because the alarms are ringing all the time. I couldn't hear a friend telling me they love me. I couldn't hear a friend saying, hey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. That's a bad decision to make with your money. Let's be calm. Let's be steady. I couldn't hear it. I was out of my mind. And so there is a season when shutting the alarms off for a while is good so that you can go do the things you need to do to get well. But I think the chicken or the egg, I, at this point, I think for the 99% of us, I don't think that question matters. I think what's important is your body goes to an alarm state to try to keep you safe. And so the question is, what's my body trying to protect me from? Let's deal with that.
Yeah, let's go deeper into that. I mean, for the people that are going through anxiety, which a lot of people are, is it really come down to just being inner focused about figuring out what are the things that are worrying me and then addressing those things? Or is there something deeper than just going internally and figuring out the external problems that are causing issues like money issues or relationship issue? Or is there something deeper inner that we have to fix?
I never want to use the word fix because I don't like the mechanization of people, but I get what you're saying. I think it's both and. So the challenge with anxiety by itself on its face is somebody may come sit with me and say, I'm 45 pounds overweight. I hate how I look. I'm living my parents' life, and I swore to myself I wouldn't do that. It hurts when I move. My kids I get frustrated with my kids because I can't play with them, and they're always yelling and running around and want me to play, and I just get frustrated. I would tell that person, you have to exercise. You have to move your body. The literature is clear. You have to move your body. And if you're a CEO and you're starting your third business and you make $1 jillion and you have 2 kids and you have they used to call them the 3 halves of your day, right? You have the morning and then the afternoon and then the nighttime, right? You're always going. And then you come in and you're like, I'm going to start doing a triathlon also in addition to my CrossFit workout. I'm going to tell you, stop working out. Stop. At this point, it's just additional stress on an already stressed out life. Your body can't handle anymore. And so I think the challenge with anxiety is there's not a one, like if everyone just did this thing. I think there's a series of principles that people can live by. And so if you grew up in a home where you knew when dad drove up the driveway, you needed to just get small and go away. Like the safest thing for this house is for me to go in my room and shut the door. Then you're going to fast forward 25 years and you're going to get married and your husband's going to come home or your wife's going to come home and drive up the driveway. Your body will start sounding the alarms because it put a GPS pin in that moment, in that sound, in that moment, in that relational dynamic. And it will start pulling you away. Let's just go into the bedroom. Let's go shut the door and go into the bathroom. This is probably a good time to go fold towels and shut the door. You're going to find yourself pulling away. And so that person is going to have to deal with those stories from when they were a kid. They're going to have to understand the things that kept me safe as a kid are going to destroy my adult relationships on not everybody, but on the whole, right? Generalized. And for some people, it's very present. Your body knows you have no friends. You have nobody to call in the middle of the night, and it would be failing you if it let you sleep all night. And that's why you keep popping your head awake at 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. Or you owe money on 2 cars and a mortgage and your kid's private school, and you're still paying off your student loans. Your body's going to snap to awake every morning at 2:30 in the morning. Every time your boss looks at you a little bit cross-eyed. Why? Because if your boss fires you, you lose everything. Your shelter, your food, and your body would be failing you if it let you sleep in that kind of threat. And we just call that normal now. And so I think we're blaming our bodies for taking care of us, and we keep putting our bodies in these insane, like evolutionarily insane situations. Our bodies aren't designed to be lonely. Our bodies aren't to have no tribe, because that meant death. Our bodies aren't designed to have our food and our transportation and our home taken away from us overnight because we're so heavily leveraged, right? Debt was how you captured people in the old days. That's just how we live now. And so, of course, we're anxious all the time. And we could just keep going, right? We have no mindfulness practice. Every religious system on planet Earth had a system of mindfulness and prayer and taking a knee before something bigger than you. And we just got real arrogant because we can pump water into our house from underground and we can push a button and food shows up at our front door. And so we've just gotten real arrogant about our place in the cosmos. And our bodies know you can't handle the universe. You cannot carry that. So it's going to start that low-level alarm system. And I think going back and pulling those strings and those alarms, if you have a mindfulness practice, when that guy cuts you off, it's not a threat to you. Like your ego has no play in this. And you yelling and screaming and banging on the dashboard, he can't hear you. He's listening to like house music in his little Honda Civic that he dropped even lower. He can't hear you. He didn't care about you. You're just choosing to die earlier from stroke and heart disease because you can't, right? So it's just about backing up and saying, what kind of life do I want to live? And I think we talk a lot about optimization. We talk a lot about ROI. We talk a lot about net worth. We talk a lot about these metrics, and nobody talks about peace. Like whenever I talk to somebody who's like, well, I've got $300,000 in cash in the bank. I'm trying to figure out the investment. And I say, how much you owe on your mortgage? And they're like, $275,000, but I got a good interest rate. I always tell them, hey, dude, I want you to try something. Pay your house off. Well, no, my interest rate's so low and I could get this more in the market. I'm like, I know you can. I know you can. Pay your house off. And give yourself 60 days of your body metabolizing the fact that nobody can take your home from you. Come what may, nobody can take your home. Your body will sleep deeper than you you could imagine. And nobody is solving for peace. Everybody is solving for leverage and connection and ROI and all. It's madness. And so if you pay your house off and you just hate the feeling of having a paid off house, if you hate it, you can go take a HELOC out on it, borrow that money and invest it. Go for it, right? But this idea of nobody's solving for peace. And peace means you go slower. Peace means you take a little bit less of a return. Peace means, in the anti-fragile sense, you cover your bases, right? You make sure that there's not an investment you have that can take everything from you. And if you owe money, that's an investment you've put out into the world that can take everything from you if they call the note. And I think and then when you cover your bases, then you can, take big risks on the other end, because they're not fatal, right? They won't end you. And if they come true, dude, you win everything because you're playing on house money. But it's just a way of operating in the world. And so my whole book, my whole ethos in my life is, how can I solve for peace? And man, you can leverage out, but I'm telling you right now, when I'm 95 years old, you talk about the blue zones, man, solve for peace. And then we'll have fun in the margins, man. And we'll ROI in the margins. And it's not a matter of not flexing and strutting and getting it done and snapping into a Slim Jim. It's none of that. It's just a matter of, man, at the end of the day, I want my kids to want to come home. And I want me and my wife to get really old together and still be able to go for walks. And I want my parents to have a nice resting place as they get really old. And I want my friends to have a safe place they can come visit if they just need to get out of town. And that's just solving for peace, man. And you can't put a number on that.
Yeah, I love the idea of like protecting the downside, playing with house money. Everything's upside from there, right? You're not always anxious about protecting the downside and being paranoid about it. I feel like whenever I feel anxious about big things that I can't control, kind of go back to like what Stoics, a lot of what they preach, which is focus on the things that you can control.
Right.
And focusing, this is definitely something I wasn't great at initially, but something that has helped me personally, that may help some other people listening, is focusing in such tiny, minor things that you can't control, like flossing your teeth.
Yes.
Something that you're supposed to do every day, going for a walk, going to the gym, eating healthy, just stuff that, like doing meditation, just stuff that you can have complete control over. No one can take that away from you, but it's small. But at the end of the day, you feel like you have some control over your life.
I think that is
anxiety,
transcendent. Yes. I actually have a yellow pad that I carry with me, and I'll just draw a line down when I get stressed. And usually I get stressed about big stuff, right? Like the housing market collapsing and the stock market, whatever, and climate change,
nothing you can control,
nothing.
Right? Yeah.
And so,
yes,
it's like my buddy Lane Norton says, like when it comes to diet and nutrition, we so often we step over $100 bills to pick up pennies, right? We're like asking about metformin and NAD supplements and injections. And it's like, well, hey, do you work out 5 times a week? And do you go for walks? And what's your sleep like? And like, do you have a couple of good friends? We skip all this stuff. Like, okay, now I got a GLP-1 and I'm going to, like, dude, like, stop eating pizza. Let's start there, right? And so all that to say is when it comes to, an anxious life, what can you actually control here? Let's start the little things. I'm worried about the economy collapsing. You owe $300,000 between your house and your car and your student loans. You can work on that, right? And if the economy collapses and you owe nobody anything and you have $100,000 in the bank, you know who wins? You, because you can start buying stuff with cash, right? You win. And so if you want to be in those positions, I just draw a line. What can I control? What can I not control? And then I wad the paper up, throw it away. But it often ends up what you just said: make my bed, floss my teeth, go for a run, go for a walk, go lift. I can do that right this second. I can't fix it's 115 degrees in the middle of May, but I can go do those things, right? And then we'll work from there. And I haven't found a problem that doesn't diminish or clarify when I do those things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Do you also do, like, when you have anxiety, do you ever find yourself kind of like paying up the debt is kind of maybe a good analogy to that, which is protecting the downside of having frameworks where you're thinking about what the worst case scenario might be? Like Tim Ferriss calls this like the fear setting, or Stoics have this idea of like negative visualization instead of the common positive visualization, which is thinking about what are the worst things that could happen. And oftentimes you realize it's actually not as bad as you think, but we often subconsciously through our bodies and our imaginations imagine all of these worst scenarios. But when we actually concretely write it down, it's actually not as bad as you think it is. Is there something like that that has helped you beyond the note, kind of focusing on the small things?
Yeah, I mean, at a meta level, I was really blessed for several years I was the dean of students at a law school, and I was moonlighting with the local police department at the city. And I would go around and do death notifications and crisis work with them. And so if somebody dies in a home, the police show up and generally work that scene homicide back. The assumption that somebody could have been murdered here, we're going to work that scene backwards. That's really tough for a mom whose 4-year-old child is dead in that room over there, right? To have that sort of very clinical approach. And the police officers I work with were so compassionate and kind, but they got a job. And so my job was to go sit with mom, to go sit with dad, or to let mom know, hey, husband has just died in a car wreck. And so for me, that was a blessing. And my dad was a homicide detective. So I've known from day one, like I was a little kid, I know how this ends for all of us. We all get boxed up at the end, right? And so for me, it's less about worst case scenario, and it's the delusion that the masses, the lives they live, trying to pretend this isn't coming for us. Like, I've made peace with it. I'm a person of faith, and so like the back end, that end is taken care of. But in the day to day, those who will continue living when I'm gone, man, that's gonna happen. There's not a, and I'm not excited for it. I don't want it to be here today or tomorrow. I want it to be a long way off, but it's coming. And so, yeah, it's not even living the downside. It's just, I call it owning or choosing reality. This is coming. Do you have health insurance for your family? Do you have a will? For God's sake, 70% of this country doesn't have a will. We can all agree on one thing, and that's the government isn't super great with our stuff. And but when you don't have a will, you're just saying, hey, government, you take care of my wife and kids while I'm gone, right? Like, it's just madness. And so even if you don't, quote unquote, have anything, get a will and make that a part of your life. It's a planning document for, I'm not going to be here someday. I want these 2 guitars that I got and my Xbox controllers to go to Bill, right? Whatever it is, but get in the habit of thinking life's going to go on. This earth will continue to spin long after you're gone. And as you get older and you have more responsibilities, that means you have to have life insurance. That means you have to pay things off as quickly as possible. And so if I die today, my wife will not have a house payment. And if I die today, my wife will have the unimaginable blessing of spending a season being really sad and deep in grief. And dude, I'm telling you, Sean, I've sat with people whose husbands have died on Friday afternoon and they got to go get to work on Monday because they got nothing, right? Wow. And it's harrowing when you look at a widow and she's 60 and she looks at you and says these scary words, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's like, you got to go get a job, right? So when it comes to, it's very stoic, and Tim is right, but to me, it's just choosing reality. This world's going to keep spinning without you. What legacy, what path will you have rolled out for those who are going to still be here? And then it comes to the day-to-day life. Yeah, you're exactly right. This is a snapshot in history, but if you make 50 grand at your assistant director job at some sales company or some startup or some whatever. If you get fired tomorrow, chances are you can go get a job as an assistant manager at a McDonald's and you're going to replace your salary. Your ego is going to be bruised up, but you're going to be okay if you put your ego aside and go get to work. And most of us want to do this job in this town, and I'm passionate about this, whatever that means, or I'm called to. If you can put your ego aside, you can usually get after it and go make it work. And if you're a person who has hustled and worked and you have a good work ethic and you're a good person of good character and you've got connections and you've got friends and you've got people who can speak on your behalf, it often works out better when the job you think I can't live without is gone, right? Or the worst case scenario. And so it's both and, dude. I think I love that question. I haven't thought about that in a while, so I appreciate you asking that. But the call is going to come from all of us. Your mom has fallen. Dad's got cancer. Dad's in the hospital. That call will come for every single one of us if it hasn't come already. It will come for each one of us. And so who are we going to be up until that moment, and who are we going to be after that moment? What world have we created for when that moment comes? Not if, but when that moment comes. I tell that story in the book that, man, decisions my wife and I made 15 years ago. And dude, it was embarrassing being a senior leader at a university driving a 93 F-150 that got 6 miles to the gallon and was so loud and obnoxious and it was falling apart. But my wife and I said, let's work. And it took us 15 years. Let's owe nobody anything. Nobody, anything. And then my cousin dies suddenly. And I got the privilege of getting on a plane and not caring about the tickets and getting a hotel. And I got to fly to Houston across the country and just go be really sad. And because it wasn't, hey, I can't do this because I got to be at work, or I got to, it was a gift, but it was a gift 15 years in the making, right? And it was a lot of sacrifice up until then so that we could live this magical life called peace. And peace doesn't mean bad things won't come. Peace means I'm ready for them when they come.
Yeah. And I guess this kind of central theme around talked about leaving something for others, a legacy, being there for others when they need you, kind of makes me think about this idea of escaping your torturous mind. Of Jordan Peterson, he talks about how the more you think about yourself, the more miserable you are.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I feel one of the
yes, amen.
And it really comes down to, you know, I feel one of the beautiful parts about having a marriage, a family. I'm not married, but
get there quick, dude. It's awesome.
On how getting there. But I'd love to get your opinion on how marriage life, how having a family, how that's shaped who you are as a person, how that's helped you with your anxiety, perhaps about getting outside of your own head, serving others, prioritizing other people instead of yourself, which I think is more common if you don't have a family to take care of because you're constantly in your own head. What has that done for you as someone that's not married and for people that aren't married?
Man, for the first 10 or 15 years, I was a stubborn mule and it was brutal. It made me more anxious because I hadn't dealt with me and I thought it would solve me. I thought finding the right woman would solve me. I thought having kids would solve me, and it doesn't. It just exposes you. And so that raw nerve, I got more anxious because it wasn't just, am I going to survive? It was like, man, now I've created a human who's I'm responsible for it. Now, how are we going to survive? And so it actually escalated my anxiety. It wasn't until, but again, you nailed it. Great question, Sean. I was doing all of this for me. It wasn't until I realized the greatest gift I can give my family is the spirit of service. How can I love you today? And this really comes from, there's a famous showdown my wife and I had where we sat across the table and it was like, are we going to stay married? We can't keep staying like this. And I need to know if this is it. And we're going to be adults and we're going to be kind and we're going to split things up and we're going to go our separate ways. But we got to make a grown-up decision here. And she said, I'm still in. And I said, I'm still in. And then it became the hard work was, okay, we can't do anything like we were doing it. What does that mean? And it started with, how can I love you today? What's the picture of today look like? And that's a question of humility and service. It's not, I'm going to leave my mark on the world. I'm going to impose my will on the world. That is, how can I help you make the best day possible that you have in your heart and mind. And I didn't know how to do that. And so that took several years of practice and learning. And it's a risk. It's vulnerable, because then you have to hope that she does the same thing, that she says, "Oh, how can I love you today?" And if you both get into that rhythm, and you'll get out of step, like every dancer gets out of step and every band gets wonky sometimes. But if that becomes the ethos, then you create a world where you open your eyes in service to other people, to something bigger than you, to legacy, to watering a family tree that's going to be in the ground long after you're gone. And man, I'm getting goosebumps now. It just takes all that anxiety away, because you're not working to spin your wheels in the mud, which is what hitting the gas on your own life is. What about me? What about me? What about me? How are you going to make my life good? How's this workout going to make my life good? How's this job going to make my life good? And it's more about, how can I clear the path so that my son and my daughter know I've always got them. And there's some paths for them I can't clear, but man, I will always be here. I'll be cheering you on. I'll be your number one fan. I told my daughter, I was like, man, whoever comes to love you, they better bring their A game, because they're going to have a tall order, right? Same with my son. But when you wake up and your day is becoming, how can I make other people's lives better? There's a fine line to where it can become codependent, and that's not what I mean. My day isn't dependent on whether my son or daughter are having a good day or not. But it is an ethos of service and commitment to something bigger than yourself. And I think that's about faith. I also think, to extend what Jordan's talking about, is that's something, it's about your family, but it's also about a faith practice. You have to, at some day, like all of our psychological theories end up with this idea of self-actualization, right? That you finally become the center of the universe when you get safety, and you get commitment, and you get love, and you get all the ability to think big. Then you can become your own lighthouse on your own hill. And I think to a large degree, we have that. We have everything. And we're realizing our bodies can't hold, the center can't hold. And so there's this ancient practice of getting down on your knees or on your face and saying, "Dear God, or gods, please help." And I think it's a reclamation of, the world doesn't spin around us. We are in service to this thing that is bigger than us. And when you make peace with that, I think even the great atheist writer, I quote him in the book, David Foster Wallace, talks about, like, we are beings made to worship, and you will worship something. You'll worship beauty, and you'll never be pretty enough, and you'll worship money, and you'll never have enough, and on and on. I think it's just being humble and recognizing, all right, there's something bigger at play here that I'm in service to, and I'm going to utilize my skills and talents towards that end as a gift. And man, you'll find your anxiety melt in a pretty profound way, because you are doing things for a purpose. And that purpose is not what I'm passionate about, bro. And that purpose is not trying to use people for your ends, but it is just putting a few drops of water in the river that's running through the universe. And it's a pretty extraordinary thing.
Man, what a powerful way to end this, man. Incredible insights, incredible conversation. I want to make sure, if people enjoy this conversation, they get more from your message. Your podcast is climbing the charts. You're hitting national bestsellers. Like, where are the best places for people to start finding more about you if they haven't? And where can they dig more into all the message, the value that you're providing for the world?
I would say in this order, after, and only after you listen to Sean's podcast all the way through, you can find the Dr. John Delony Show podcast. And it's old school. It's like Fraser Crane or old Dr. Phil. Like, people call in and we figure it out live on the air, and it's a blast. And that comes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you get that on YouTube or get that on anywhere you get podcasts. The books, Building a Non-Anxious Life and Own Your Past, Change Your Future, available anywhere you buy books, and all the stores, and Amazon, and johndelony.com. And then, after you've been outside, and after you've played with your friends and family, and after you've got some connections, if you need to go to social media, you can follow me there. And it's usually just it's a catalog of my failures as a husband and a dad and a neighbor, and trying to get better at what I'm doing. You can follow me there.
Beautiful. John, I appreciate the conversation, and thanks so much for coming in.
You're a great host, and I'm really grateful for the hospitality. Good man. Thank you.
No, it helps to have an amazing guest. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in.